MMA math doesn't work. I keep on hearing that. Is it true? I don't think so. Let me give you another statement. MMA math, let me give you a more perfect statement, okay? MMA math doesn't work all the time. Okay, that I could agree to, but the idea that MMA math doesn't work, it's simply not true. There's a number of things in this sport that just are not true. And they get stated. It's not the hill I want to die on. I don't care if the vernacular gets wrong. It's more helpful for me when I know things that other people don't. It helps to keep me in this seat. Like I don't have a begrudgence of the ignorance of others. Sometimes I do have a surprise. The idea that weight advantage, that expression has stayed around so long, or even reach advantage, the idea that stayed around so long has been a surprise to me. The idea of commenting on how good somebody's footwork is, for me, is a surprise. You're talking about how their feet move? Why are you saying it in like a complex manner? If they're orthodox or southpaw, if it's a big cage or a little cage, like some of these concepts are completely absurd. But they stick around, a feeling out process in the sport of professional boxing that doesn't exist in the sport of amateur boxing, right? Like there's some of these things, and that's much along the lines of MMA math doesn't work. Yes, it does. It works extremely well. In fact, it's quite possibly the most scientific thing that we have. There is no line by any betting company, and I got to turn to betting, guys. I got to turn to my partners at DraftKings. And do you want to know why? It's completely different when you say something, whether you're trolling or whether you're being sincere or it's just a popularity contest. You're saying it because it's popular. You're saying it because you want to, or you're saying it because you want to stick it to somebody else. Like, the sincerity does change completely when you put your money down. That's when the troll stops and the popularity contest ends and your true belief comes out. And there is not a handicapper, there is not a line that has ever been set that did not factor common opponent into it. There is not a seeding within the NCAA of any sport where common opponent is not considered. Are you aware of that? Basketball, wrestling, volleyball, football, when they go to a seeding meeting, there's only so many things you can argue. You don't get to just bring things up. There's a criteria. Common opponent is always allowed in all sports. But people will tell you MMA math doesn't work. Styles make fight. There's another stupid one. You want a really good fight? It's the style that makes a fight. No. It's two guys that went out there and fought. Or two guys that didn't. That's an exciting fight and that's a boring fight. There was not some genius ahead of time that knew this style versus... Shut up. But I do want to go to Iron Mike and Jake Paul. Styles make fights. The math doesn't work. So many times we'll look at a guy and say he's done. So many times we call for people's retirement, very, very seldomly. In fact, at least for the big names, the only one that ever retired before we called for it that I can think of is Khabib. I cannot think of a meaningful name. I'm not talking about, what are the meaningful names? So more of a broad stroke. I can't think of somebody that retired prior to us calling for it. We could see it. We could see that this ship has sailed. However, the people that person beat are not automatically disqualified. And that is a fascinating concept. If this person should retire because, you fill in the blank, they've slowed down, they're weak, they're chinny, they're not as disciplined, they're not as good, whatever it is, then the guys that he beat, to a degree, would automatically go into that same sinking ship, but they don't. They don't. There is tremendous resentment to those that organized Vitor Belfort versus Evander Holyfield. And if it's true, if Evander was so bad he never should have been licensed, he had slowed down and the power was gone, if all those things are true, but he whipped Mike by proxy, then Mike shouldn't be licensed, but he was. Oh, and by the way, I don't begrudge that. I thought Mike went out and looked very good against Roy Jones. But if you were to think of Mike's last fight, you guys know who it was? Very few of you do, but you know what I'll tell you. Kevin McBride. Okay, now I'm not talking about Jake Paul versus Kevin McBride now. I'm talking about the Kevin McBride back then that beat the hell and sent into retirement Mike Tyson. If that version of Kevin McBride versus Jake Paul fought right now, Jake Paul would beat him. So if Jake Paul right now could beat the best version of a guy that stomped out and retired Mike, And I get you to agree to that, right? That's an opinion. We don't know. We don't have the time. But if I get you to agree to that, and I did, all of you are going, yeah, he would beat him. If I get you to agree to that, how can a portion of you be arguing that you believe Mike is going to beat Jake Paul? It would disqualify it. Yet, it doesn't. It doesn't within your mind. You're looking to argue right now. You're looking to push back right now. I baited you to something. I got you to do it. Now you're pushing back. It's one of those things. There is something to be said for the rules. It's massive. Like, before you throw this up and go, Chael just proved it. Mike Tyson has no choice. Like, no, that's part of my message. But my other part is, how do we sell the idea that perhaps Mike does? If Mike got beat 15 years ago by a guy that could not go with Jake Paul, how can we believe that Mike can go with Jake Paul? And I want to answer that question. You know how you can sell yourself on that idea? Like, if you're Mike himself, to not feel like a lamb that's going into the slaughter, to feel that you got a way to go. I have a way to beat this guy, and I got to follow, and I got to do this, but I have a way. I can do it. Because if you don't think that, you don't train. There's no reason to work really hard to lose when you could do absolutely nothing and lose. So how does Mike himself and his coaches, how do they sell himself on the idea? And I've attempted to tell you, to no avail, but I'm alone. I'm on third base wearing a catcher's mitt on this, but if you change one rule within a sport, you've now changed the sport. If basketball, if all of a sudden a bucket is worth 5 points, you've now changed the sport. If there's such a thing as a 7-point shot, you've changed the sport. Like, if we came in with that rule today, silly as that, just play with me. If there was we insert a 7-point shot in basketball today, if you were to apply that rule over time, all of your NBA greats and records would be gone. They'd all be different. This got tested to a degree. There's a guy named Dean Heil out of Oklahoma State. He is one of the best college wrestlers I have ever seen. That is a literal statement. At the time of this story, he's a senior, and he's a two-time NCAA champion. Oh, by the way, did I mention undefeated? During the season, they changed a rule. One. And I had so many people tell me, Dean Heil will never win another national championship. And Dean Heil hadn't lost it, right? That's stupid. Stupid people. I realized that they changed the rule in a position that Dean finds himself in a lot, but Dean will adapt and just not go to that position. Not only did he not win the championship, he didn't even place. And by the way, Dean, when you see this, that was meant to be a shout out to you. But it's a very big deal that if you change one rule, you change the sport. And I tie that into ours of MMA. I don't have the foggiest idea how we have sold on the athletes and or the public that a main event and or title fight goes 2 more rounds than the rest of them. I don't know how we sold that, but we didn't have to sell it because no media member asked the question. Like the Super Bowl, the championship, the big game doesn't become 5 quarters, or the 100-yard sprint that Carl Lewis and Usain Bolt were so good at. Like when it's for the gold, it doesn't become 103 meters. There's no sport where you change the dynamic of the actual event to become a number one. I became a number one contender in 3-round fights, but to win the belt, I got to go into a 5-round fight. I've never done one. How do I know? I think that's a very fair question for me. Now, by the way, you don't have to bone up your answer. I never go against our industry in my entire time. That's my one question. I'm very surprised that got over. I'm very surprised that works. I'm very surprised that question has never been asked by anybody, complete with the comparisons to other sports that I just made. And you want to know why time is so important? It's everything. Time's everything. The guys that are the champions today that went for 25 minutes, are they the same guys? If that same rule applied way back in 1993, would they still be champions when we started? Because according to the champion, according to the most successful champion ever himself, the answer is no. According to Royce Gracie himself, if you implement the rules of today where you break them and you break the action, you come over here and you do all these different things, no, the history books would be very different. And Royce had to demonstrate an ultimate mental toughness to know I could be out there all day and I accept it. And you might think that about yourself, but it's very different to find yourself in that environment. Royce's dad, and it had to do with a day. He fought some guy, they fought for a day. It was something crazy. I'm telling you this because an athlete in combat will always take inventory. 10 seconds in, he will do the math. Okay, I'm 10 seconds in. I've got to duplicate that 900 more times. And as soon as I'm 20 seconds in, I'm 30 seconds in. Now I've only got to duplicate it 894 more times. You'll be doing this math. And as soon I can do it. Let's do another one. Okay, I'm down. I got to do it. As soon as you come to, I can't do it, you start looking for a way out. It's very important that you understand that. Because you don't actually know if Mike Tyson would have lost to Kevin McBride all the way back then if they fought under these rules. You don't know at what point in that fight Mike got tired and realized, I don't have the endurance to hold up for 12 rounds. I might as well get out now. And you don't know if when confronted with that and realizing I got to be in here for 12 rounds or I can quit now, versus there's only 8 rounds in the fight like there is with Jake Paul. Versus it's 2-minute rounds with a 60-second break as opposed to 3-minute rounds with a 60-second break. Like, you don't know at what point he fell apart. It's presented to the audience as though it's about punches. That's how we present it. But the athletes themselves know it's about spirit and will and nothing else. I'm going to use my punches to break your spirit, and you're going to use mine to break your will. That's it. That's all we're doing here. It's not about combination or footwork or I hit you in the body before I come upstairs. No, I'm going to use those things to make you quit. Or you're going to use those things to make me quit. I'm only sharing with you. You don't know if a guy would have fallen apart when the barn was in sight. If MMA, if all the records you see to this day, and the greats and the Khabib and the George St. Pierre, I mean the absolute greats, if you redid the sport and it was 5 30-second rounds, much more realistic to a street fight than 25 minutes, by the way, the record books would be completely different. You change one rule, you change the sport. And if you're looking for a way to go, or how a Mike Tyson that lost to Kevin McBride, and Kevin McBride on his best day couldn't beat the current Jake Paul. And that's not an assault to Kevin McBride. That's a reality. That's how good Jake is. But that's not what they're doing. And it isn't apples to apples. And you're not looking at common opponents. Common opponents apply when the rules were the same. A common opponent to me fighting somebody else, and we have a common opponent that we both played in horseshoes, it doesn't. We had to fight the guy or he's not a common opponent. Mike Tyson has never been in a situation where he had to fight 8 2-minute rounds. You got to correct me and tell me about the Roy Jones. Go ahead. My point is the same. And that's why. And that's what he can hang his hat on. And that's what his corner and coaches can hope for. And that's one thing is he starts to fall apart because he's getting tired. And the greatest fear of a combat athlete is exhaustion. That's something he can hang his hat on. It is more likely we reach the finish line before I fall apart, at least than it was back when I lost to Kevin McBride, which is why that example doesn't hold up. You can't get this anywhere. You don't have that kind of insight anywhere. Your Honor, you're a witness.